to me, the art of storytelling is you tie a personal experience to the product that you're selling.
This is the Storytelling for Sales podcast, a show about leveraging the power of storytelling to ignite your sales performance and grow your business.
Hi, and welcome back to Storytelling for Sales podcast. I'm your host, Ed Bilat, and today we have Harsh Sabikhi, country manager of GitHub, joining us from Toronto, Canada. Harsh Sabikhi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, great to have you here. So Harsh, would love to hear your story. It's very exciting. But before we jump in, I will ask you one of our traditional questions. What type of business success story inspires you and why?
Sure. I would have to say Jack Ma. He had failure after failure, but he never gave up. I can't remember how many times he actually got rejected from jobs and some schools. And so me personally, I'm a firm believer in positive thinking, where a positive mindset leads to great results. However, failure allows us to take a step back and analyze ourselves, the situation, and why we failed. This is where combining a positive attitude with learnings from failure comes into play. Jack Ma learned something from each of his failures early on to now create one of the largest companies in the world.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think he applied for a fast food restaurant like 20 times.
He did, yeah.
And he was the only one rejected, I think. Right? So
exactly, yeah. But he didn't let that bother him. And that's the best thing, right? Because, and I think it was Muhammad Ali as well who followed his strategy before Jack Ma, who said, I either win or I learn.
And I think you hit a very important point, because sometimes we get into this culture of win or lose. So instead of using the word lose, you use the word learn. So
exactly.
this way it's more positive. No, great example. Obviously, in our generation, it's one of the tremendous success stories of somebody coming out of nowhere. And building a new brand, an exciting brand, which is worldwide accepted. Okay, great. So let's turn the spotlight back at you, if we can. So a software engineer who went to sales. Now, yes. I have to say this almost never happens. Okay, because I remember running a SaaS team myself. Right. Yeah. And my sales guys, we were extremely scared of all the engineers and coders. So whenever we have to go talk to them, it was like I don't understand it, what I'm going to say. And you know what we found out? Then engineers, they want to talk to sales. They were just as scared, right? Because they thought we're all crazy, obnoxious people who exist to sell the product, which actually should be selling itself. So you crossed that bridge. So tell us about this experience. How did you do it? Why did you do it? Take us.
Sure, I did. So everything you just mentioned, Ed, that is spot on. I would say it was spot on a long time ago. When I say long time ago, 15, 20 years ago. And that's when I was a developer. I would say, though, I think the personality and because of social media, because of our interactions online, the developers over time have changed as well. The developers are now a lot more what I call business friendly or customer friendly, if you will. But let's talk about sort of, my transition, right? So I have an electrical engineering background. I went to McMaster and I did an internship with Texas Instruments in 2001. And then that's when I got into, actually writing software for a large organization. I always did software before that. But so in the early 2000s, when I was a software developer up until 2006, I knew I had a passion for building things. I enjoyed writing software, and seeing the joy I took was seeing how my software was being used. It wasn't until when I say being used, meaning being used by the end customers. It wasn't until my mentors within the engineering organization, the product marketing, the product management organization, brought me along on their sales calls or conferences, and then I actually got feedback firsthand from the customers using the software. And that's when I realized there's the bridge right there, that the problem development has had for a very long time is it's been a siloed organization. It
Right.
still is.
You work
Yeah,
alone, right? Basically.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it still is in a lot of organizations today, where the developers are completely disconnected from the end stakeholders. They typically have internal stakeholders, and those internal stakeholders work with the external stakeholders. So it wasn't, until I got to leave my desk to meet the clients and customers, I
Face to
realized, wait a
face. Yeah.
minute, yeah,
Yeah.
this actually is it's fun because you're listening to your customer, you see what they want, and then you turn that into a feature request or an enhancement request or a bug fix on your backlog. And then you go from there. So it was at that point where I realized, okay, I'm going to slowly start to transition into more of a product management, project manager role to do that. And then from there, then I said, okay, well, it's great. I realized I love presenting in front of customers. I am not scared of doing that. And I love gathering feedback. So that's when I realized, okay, what other customer facing roles can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And the logical choice was sales. I had the luxury of working for a Fortune 80 company in Texas Instruments, and I had to start from scratch. Ed, I'm not going to lie to you. It was a bit of a step back, if you will, from a career perspective, where being a developer,
Right.
I had to then now literally start from the bottom and be a technical sales associate at Texas Instruments. Then I became a technical sales rep, and then go on from there. But it was a jump that I really enjoyed doing because I knew if I didn't do this now, it would be much more difficult later on.
Mm-hmm. So did the product knowledge and understanding your own code give you the confidence of talking to the
Absolutely.
clients? Yeah. Right.
That's exactly it, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
used to write software. It was called Code Composer Studio, was the software that we built, and I wrote an application that allowed embedded developers to view what's going on into their SoC, the system on a chip.
Huh.
And then later, then when I moved into hardware sales at Texas Instruments, I was selling those chips. So I knew, the software that was going to help them make use of those chips.
Huh, interesting. So it actually helped you. Of course, you had to learn new sales techniques and approaches.
Yes,
Influencing, presenting, closing. This is a new world. However, you already
that's
had the background of actually understanding the product. Because I don't know
that's
how
right.
many times I can tell you we've been sitting in a boardroom, right? So in the first day, so it's just a sales team presenting, and then VP, of engineering walks in and he says, "Okay, sales talk is over. Let's just talk about
Yeah,
the actual product." And then my entire team would go silent because nobody could say anything. We don't understand it, and we looked at our, technical director and says, "Okay,
right.
could you please take us?" And the next 2 days, we'll be just sitting
hmm
there smiling, pretending we understand what they're talking about.
No,
Yeah.
and I think that's where I see the tide shifting as well. Where I think the future is going to be uh, people that can straddle both lines, right? Of
Mhm.
course, we're still going to have, roles as a solutions engineer, a sales engineer, if you will, a sales rep, and then also the engineering team. Those roles don't go away, but
Mhm.
I think crossing the line and having a knowledge of what everyone does, I think having cross-functional teams is where this whole agile principle also came from, right?
Mhm.
Where understanding what other people are doing in the organization only helps you do your job better.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, I've noticed that at both Rayleigh Software and GitHub, you were the very
Yes.
first Canadian sales rep, actually, a Canadian employee, and now you run
Yes.
the entire country. So, how did it feel to be the very first, and what kind of challenges you had to go through?
Sure. It's definitely a lot of risk taking. It's you start and you build from the ground up. Canada's always an afterthought for American startups, and rightfully so, right? They have to build up the business at home first in America, and then have an international expansion strategy. So I'll talk about Rally. Rally, I took over. I was the first person there, just handling just the major accounts, and then I was there for over 3 years, almost 3.5 years. And then from there, going from one person, we grew the team to 6 people, including me. And at Rally, it was all about, I mentioned Agile before, having a cross-functional team where
Mhm.
we had So I was considered the quarterback, and then I had a territory account manager. I had a customer solutions manager,
So you had a
success
you
manager.
had a team right away, right? So
Well, not right away. No, I had to
mhm.
build to that, right? Because you have to build enough business to justify
To
the additional
justify,
headcount.
because you built it like 8 times within 3 years, right?
Yes, exactly, right. So like we grew the revenue, eight x, right? And to do that, you need a cross functional team. So it was scary in the beginning, right? Because you're essentially starting a greenfield region.
Mm-hmm.
You don't the Canadian customers don't really know much about the product, so you're not just doing sales, you're doing business development, you're doing a little bit of marketing, and it's a fun challenge, but I really enjoyed it because I learned a lot. I learned a lot from Rally, and that's what helped me get to where I am at GitHub. Now with GitHub, I want to be clarified. I'm the country manager, from a sales perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't obviously have engineering working for me, but from a sales perspective, same story. Where it started off, I was the first sales rep in Canada, and now we've expanded to take over the entire
Mm-hmm.
country from a sales perspective, and it's a very similar challenge. And we're doing the same thing we did at Rally, but GitHub is much bigger than Rally, and now we recently got acquired by Microsoft. So the 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 level of responsibility, if you will, has been magnified just because of the scale.
Sure, of course. So now you coach and mentor other people on your team, right? So isn't it
Yes,
like really hard to coach and mentor cross functional teams, people with different background?
it is, and that's why I have a player coach role, right, where I still manage some of our biggest customers only. And then all the other ones, I'll join the calls. I'll work with my team on helping them, understand. Okay, so here's the people we should be prospecting. Here's the messaging that might resonate. Breaking those messages up into verticals, and then also joining the calls when they need me to.
Mm-hmm.
The key that I find is understanding. Okay, what is the person's background on your team, right? Uh, are they a self starter? Are they more of a task runner based, meaning you have to give them a laundry list of things to do and then
Mm-hmm.
they'll go ahead and do it? Or are they more creative thinkers where they come up with customized campaigns to generate new business, or come up with creative ways to further expand into accounts? So I think getting and understanding the profile of your team
Mm-hmm.
makes the job a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I think you brought an excellent point. In this podcast, we talk about the storytelling, right? And specific
Yes.
stories we tell to our customers in order to influence, to get their trust, to work with them, and
Yes,
actually, build a relationship. And depending on your team, depending on their background, they're gonna tell different stories, right? So, like, so what
100%.
what type of stories do your people tell? And is there a difference between different personalities? Like, what do you see in the field?
Absolutely, right. So one of the depending on the client, right? So I'll share the experience that I use, and
Uh
then
huh.
I can talk a little bit more about what other people do. But I'm a huge fan of from a storytelling perspective. I took Decker training about 4 years ago. I think 4 or 5 years ago,
Okay.
and it was one of the best training. I highly recommend that for everyone listening. Decker is all about presentation styles and skills, and they do talk about storytelling in there as well. And to me, storytelling is a way to really connect with your audience and customers at a deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
You get to uh, take a step back and not even talk about the product you are, positioning that's going to help their business needs, but you're taking a step back and really tying what you are going to be talking about to emotions and empathy, and really getting to the human emotions into the sale. So tying your personal stories to the actual sales itself. So then a few examples, at GitHub, our platform, we're an online service. We're the home of open source software.
Mm-hmm.
That's where people go to get open source software. But then we have also the largest organizations in the world that use our service, and we are the core. We're the hub of software
Yeah,
development.
it's like 24 million people using this, right?
We just passed 30 million.
30.
So,
okay.
yeah.
My stats are old. So okay.
No, it's okay. We've been going through exponential growth. So yeah, we just passed 30 million users, and with GitHub, the storytelling we use, I use, and a few of my teammates use, is customer experience and community.
Mm-hmm.
You're not buying GitHub, or you're not signing on to be part of our service just so you can work in a siloed approach. It's about joining the community. It's about the benefits you will get in getting access to the community software that's already there, and then getting the benefit of understanding, okay, your customers are utilizing this service to build X, Y, and Z. If you join that community, then you start thinking about adjacent customer experiences. The future of software development is going to be about not just what your product does,
right,
but first of all, how is your product A, different than your competition, and B, how does it fit into what the new narrative of customer experience is?
Their own story, right? Yeah.
That's right. And also, Ed, from a UX perspective and an experience perspective, I hate to say this, but it's the reality. Our lives are pretty much controlled by the Facebooks, Netflix, Amazons, Googles of the world. And they have provided interfaces and services for us to interact with. So that's sort of the narrative, if you will, of customer experience. So then we talk about how you can build that by joining and getting the community benefits to build similar customer experiences for your end customers. So that's one way we do storytelling.
Interesting. I love that. So why do some of the sales team fail in this space? Like where is the disconnect?
I honestly, I really think it's the pace of change and keeping up with the disruptions.
Okay.
Yeah, because you have a sales strategy, you have a product, it works and sells today, and you're crushing your revenue goals, right? In a year, that's not going to be the case in a lot of cases. So in the past, you sold something and you were good for 3 to 5 years minimum, right? But now, every year, you have to constantly earn the trust of your customers. You have to constantly innovate, and you have to constantly change and keep up with the disruptions that are coming left, right, and center. And that's because the pace of change is directly equivalent to the rate of commoditization. Software is becoming a commodity now.
Yeah.
And people can spin up an AWS server, overnight and start a business, with pretty much no capital expenditure, right? Very little capital expenditure. So I think that's really why sales leaders face, because if you're not constantly learning and changing and keeping up with that pace of change, you will be left behind.
Yeah, I love it, and I think it's connected exactly with the storytelling experience we just talked before. You need to tell new stories all the time, right? So it cannot be the same story for the next 10 years, right? Because the change is just too fast. Like, who would think, that like Uber is the largest taxi company in the world. They own no cars, right? So Airbnb is the largest accommodation provider, and they own no hotels, right?
Right.
So like 10 years ago, that would be unthinkable even to think that something like that. And Facebook is the largest media company in the world, and they don't write their content, right? So if you don't adapt to that, like what kind of story you can tell, like how relevant you're going to be in that space.
That's right.
So for the new folks, people who just entering workplace, like college students, like is there any particular advice you could tell them before they go to the real world?
Always stay up to date, and never think that after you leave college or university, learning is done.
Right.
I think constant learning is key. And the beauty is, with Udemy and Coursera, we're so lucky and fortunate to be living in this world where we're living in, because information and learning and education is at our fingertips.
Right.
And there's no reason why you should not be constantly learning and evolving and retooling and retraining yourselves for the future.
Perfect. I love that. So let's go to our couple of more questions before we wrap up. It's been great.
Sure.
So, what in terms of challenges ahead of us? We talked about the pace of change. Anything
Mhm.
other you see facing today's business owners, sales leaders, business leaders? What are the challenges ahead of us?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge is because I talked about the customer experience, right? I talked about how because growth within your own vertical, you might be hitting a plateau or you might be hitting a point of saturation. You now will have in the future. I think you're going to start to see uh, non-traditional competitors, and what I mean by that is if you're in the banking space and you've got your laundry list of banks
Mhm.
that you're competing
Yeah,
with.
traditionally,
Well, the
right? Yeah.
future, that's
Mhm.
right. The traditional banks, in the future, traditional banks won't be your disruptor. It might need not even be the fintech companies. It could be the technology companies or other companies like retail companies that offer their own credit card or other financial products. So I think the future, the challenge that we face in the future is companies need to grow and they need to keep shareholders happy and increase shareholder value. What's going to happen in the future is I truly believe companies are going to start to venture off into uh, areas and businesses that are not that they weren't necessarily thought of that they would be entering
Mhm.
5 to 10 years ago.
Okay. So something like completely different from what they're doing today.
Yeah, like I mean, Amazon Bank, right? There's no reason why Amazon can't be a bank,
Right. Huh.
right?
That's interesting example. Okay, so just be open-minded, minded about the pace, and at the same time be aware that other non-traditional businesses could become your competitor or your partner for that sake, right?
Exactly.
Hmm.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
And I think also the future is also cooperation. We have to stop looking at somebody who's a competitor today as a true competitor. Rather, okay, they've got a customer base, customers like their products. We have a customer base, customers like our products. How can we potentially work together to keep both of our customers happy and not necessarily worry about eating into each other's
Lunch,
revenue?
right?
Yeah, we were eating their lunch exactly.
Yeah,
So
wonderful, wonderful. I love that. Okay, and let's finish with the art of storytelling. What does it mean to you?
to me, the art of storytelling is you tie a personal experience to the product that you're selling.
Ah.
Right. So if you're talking about um, building a community, right? So how you build a community on GitHub, or how you build a business on GitHub. Well, then you can relate that to, well, how did you potentially build something? And it could be not related at all to GitHub. In fact, it probably is not related to GitHub, but it's more about you talk about the benefits of a collaboration effort, right? At the end of the day, GitHub is a collaboration platform. So storytelling should be, you lead with what does collaboration mean to you? How have you used collaboration before? And give an example of that.
Mhm.
And then you get into collaboration at GitHub, and then like a hamburger, right? And then you end off again, and how you tie that back into your initial opening message
Mhm.
of that story that you shared.
Oh, excellent point. So it's not what and how, it's more like why, right? So like why you doing this? What is your story? What's your personal value
Correct.
in going on a platform? Huh.
Exactly, because people talk about business to business or business to consumer or customer, right? So there's B2B, B2C. At the end of the day, we're all humans, right? And the underlying common denominator, if you will, it's a human to human
Yeah.
sale or interaction every day.
So it's not B2B or B2C, it's H to H, right?
H to H.
Okay,
Exactly.
great.
Sure,
No,
we can call
no,
it
no,
that.
perfect. Love the answer. So thank you so much. You guys have any upcoming events, or what would be a good way to contact you?
We do.
Uh,
Yeah, so in October, October 16th and 17th is our GitHub Universe in San Francisco. Registration's open, and we highly recommend people coming out to that. We can assure you it won't be like any other conference you've been to. GitHub does things very differently. It's in San Francisco at Palace of Fine Arts, and registration's open.
okay, great. And how could our listeners contact you?
on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way.
Okay, perfect. So we'll be happy to include that link. Again, such a pleasure to have you on the show. So thank you for joining us today. I'm glad we were able to connect. Really some good takeaways.
Great.
So thanks again for coming to the show.
Thank you so much, Ed.
That does it for this episode of Storytelling for Sales. You'll find show notes and links on our webpage, storytellingsales.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.